Shabbat Shalom. When our youngest daughter was about 3 years old, I took her with me to Target on an errand. She was holding my hand as we went in search of laundry detergent or something else we needed for the home. And there were so many choices. I think it was laundry detergent actually, because there were so many choices. And I was comparing, you know how when they tell you how much it is per ounce, for the various different sizes, and I was really calculating it down. And I finally found the laundry detergent. I was so proud of myself. I was just so excited. And I realized that my daughter was not anywhere near me anymore, which took a little bit of the shine off of the excitement I was feeling about the laundry detergent. So I dropped the laundry detergent and immediately went into full-scale panic, running up and down the aisles, went to the front of the Target where there was a security guard, and then rather calmly, I was like, is there any chance that perhaps maybe you saw a small girl about this tall in a pink sweatshirt walk out of the Target? And he said, no, absolutely not. Did not see that. So that was a relief. I figured she's still in the store. Put on my thinking cap. I thought, the toy department. She's probably in the toy department. So I ran back to the toy section, and I started to call her name, and I heard her little voice calling for me. And I scooped her up in my arms, and I held her close, and there were some tears, mostly mine, but boy, was I relieved that I'd found her. Our tradition teaches us that this is actually how it is sometimes with God. We might lose God for a moment or feel like God is not paying attention to us and has lost us somehow. In the busyness and the pain of our lives, we sometimes feel alienated from or even abandoned by God. But one way I like to think about faith is that all we need to do is call out from the depths of our soul in whatever little section of the world we find ourselves in, and somehow, almost miraculously or magically, God will appear. God will be there. Sometimes when we cry out to God, there's a sense of, where are you, God? I need you now. I'm struggling. And I'm in pain. And I'm wondering why you're not here by my side. And this week's Haftorah portion, I wrote about it in my Friday message to you, but I wanted to expand a little bit on that. It's so powerful, and it's the Torah portion, the Haftorah portion for this weekend. It begins with this powerful verse that I've seen many times before, but I never thought about it quite the way I did this year, given everything that's going on in our world. We're in chapter 49 of Isaiah, and if you grab the handouts on your way in, you might have it with you right here, and Roz is going to put it up on the screen for our folks joining from home. But it's verse 14, and it starts, Vatomer Tzion. And so Isaiah the prophet imagines all of Zion, the Jewish people, calls out and says, Azavani Adonai. La'azov in modern Hebrew to this day means to abandon, to leave behind, to abandon. So you have abandoned me, God. Va'adonai shechacheni. It's this sense that God has forgotten us somehow. Here I am in the toy section, and God doesn't even know where I am. God's completely forgotten about me. This text from Isaiah was written 2,500 years ago, and the context at that time was a context of loss and desolation and exile. We talked about this last week, and the week before we commemorated Tisha B'Av when we remember the destruction of the first and second temples. And that's the context of this verse. Our ancestors are reeling from the destruction of the first temple, along with the bloodshed and terror that came with it. It wasn't just a building that got knocked down. Tens of thousands of people were killed. Others were taken away into captivity. Prisoners, slaves of the Babylonians. And so these verses are composed in that aftermath. And I think they fit the moment we find ourselves in right now with disturbing precision. And note how communal it is. We feel this together. Vatomer Tzion. Zion says, Zion cries out, all Israel is in pain. How apt and how painfully timely. Our Israeli brothers and sisters today are traumatized by a terrible war. They sometimes talk about post-traumatic stress in Israel, and then they'll stop themselves and say, we're still in it. It's not post. It's just traumatic stress. 679 days. Hostages languish in captivity as the clock ticks relentlessly, time quite literally running out for them. And there are urgent humanitarian needs in Gaza. They're real and they're heartbreaking. The sense of our being abandoned by the world and perhaps by heaven itself feels overwhelming. But when we go back to Isaiah, there's hope to be found. Isaiah doesn't leave us in despair. Instead, Isaiah imagines God responding with such beautiful and extraordinary tenderness. Isaiah says in verse 15 of chapter 49, "Can a mother forget her child? Even if she could, I will not forget you." Even in our most desperate hour, the prophet insists that we are remembered, held, and cherished. And I find comfort in that, even as I wonder, well, if you're conscious of us, God, if you're remembering us, God, why can't you just come save us? And I don't know the answer to that. But the thought that God is at least thinking of us and that we are remembered by God is healing. And this loving, beautiful image, a mother and a child. Parents do not usually, notwithstanding my earlier and sadly true Target mishap, parents do not usually forget their children, at least not for more than a few minutes. But the prophet says, as unlikely as it is for a parent to forget their child, it is infinitely less likely for your heavenly parent, God our mother, God our Father, to do so. Isaiah imagines God saying in God's own voice, I will never forget you. And then Isaiah gives us guidance for how to navigate these challenging moments. Look to the rock, Isaiah says, from which you were hewn. And when you really try to unpack that verse, think of the imagery of a rock that is quarried from another rock. It's really asking us to remember who we are. It's asking us to remember our roots, our story, where we came from. And the image of the rock is so powerful. It's hard. It endures. It is resilient. That's who we are. So the rock from which we are hewn, that is a reminder of who we are, of our tradition, of what makes us a people. Now, Isaiah doesn't promise that there will be no suffering, but he does promise that suffering will not have the last word. And that's what's messianic about his vision. The ruins will be rebuilt, maybe not in our lifetimes. We might not live to see it. The deserts will bloom again. And we're witnessing that, of course. We get to witness that, right? But imagine 200 years ago, 300 years ago, our ancestors dreaming of that. They didn't get to see it, but we are able to see it. Imagine what future generations might see. That's part of the redemptive promise of Isaiah. Joy will return to the streets. There will be singing in the streets of Jerusalem. This was a promise that was made to the exiles in Babylon, but it is not just for the exiles in Babylon. It's for the Zion of today, that is for Israel today, and it's for Am Yisrael. It's for us too, here in Los Angeles, throughout the United States, and across the diaspora. We are experiencing a difficult time. But God, this is the faith. God does not forget us, ever. And while we might not see redemption tomorrow or the day after, it will come in time. And that's the end of this Haftarah, this beautiful, consoling, and instructive vision. God comforting Zion, comforting her ruins. And I love this image, turning destruction into what's called in Hebrew, Gan Adonai, the garden of the eternal. And it's verse 3 on your handout. Ki nicham Adonai Tzion. God has consoled Zion. God has consoled kol charvoteha, all of the ruins, everything that's been destroyed. It has that phrase, kegan Adonai, and then it says, sason v'simcha. The garden of God will be filled with joy and gladness. And what I want you to take away from my message tonight is that this final image isn't just wishful thinking. It's not just a prayer or a hope. It's actually a call to action. As we pray for peace, for the safe return of the hostages, for an end to suffering in Israel and yes, in Gaza too, and for healing in our own divided world, we have to hold fast to Isaiah's vision. And we have to remember that God is here for us, witnessing our pain and weeping alongside us. And we remember the rock from whence we were hewn. We remember who we are essentially. But that final image of the garden is the instruction. It is the imperative to us because we are the gardeners. We are the ones who have to pull the weeds and haul the water. God's garden is tended by us. And we can make that garden one of comfort, community, and inspiration. Just think about where you're sitting right now. And just think about through the miracle of technology, those of you joining from wherever you're joining can feel a little bit connected to this Gan Adonai right here. That's powerful. So I want to leave you with a question. What would it look like in your life, in our community? And I'm not going to ask you to think about the next 40 years of your life. Just think about the next week of your life. What would it look like if in this week to come, from this Shabbat to next, if you imagined yourself as God's partners in the nurturing, flowering, and fruitful abundance of this Gan Adonai, of God's garden? And maybe that garden is tended by just picking up the phone sometime over this Shabbat or after Shabbat to call a friend and say, hey, I know you're going through a rough time and I just want you to know you're not alone. I'm thinking of you. And I'm on my way over with some bagels. Or what about going out for dinner on Tuesday night? Reach out. Maybe we tend that garden by supporting an organization doing life-saving work, whether in Israel or here in Los Angeles or around the world. Maybe it's in the most trivial, seemingly way of choosing our words in a way that heal rather than harm when we're having a difficult conversation. Maybe it's literally planting something, or maybe it's figuratively planting something that will outlast us. Gan Adonai, the garden of the eternal, is not just an image of the world to come. It's something we can and must tend here and now. Shabbat Shalom.